اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وعجل فرجه. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Inshallah, we continue in a journey of purification, reading through the book of Islamic ethics or Akhlaq from Allama Naraqi. Last session, we spoke about the general remedy for ethical or spiritual diseases. There was an analogy or comparison between physical diseases and spiritual diseases, and the general treatment for those being similar. So he suggested that in general, for any disease, the first thing we need to do is to treat it with the right diet or nutrition. And in this case, for spiritual diseases, is to do the things that are ethical or that are balanced or just in that regard. For example, if somebody realizes that they have a disease of stinginess, al-bukhl, therefore, to treat it, the first remedy is to act generous, push generosity on oneself. This is the simple treatment. If that does not work, if one realizes that they're unable to do that, that's not working, they aren't able to treat that disease, then they go to the next level of using medication. In this case, some sort of self-talk and self-assessment or reckoning, hisab. So one talks to himself or herself, you should have done better, you should have known better, this is not acceptable. Do you realize the consequences of these actions and so on? And the third stage was to use, if that does not work, to use the poison, meaning the other extreme of that. Basically, this should be used carefully as with poison, but use the other extreme of that disease. So if one went to the extreme of being stingy, then give this time, not just give as in be charitable, no, a little more than that. Now you might ask, what is more than that? Without any hisab, okay, without any accounting, any kind of consideration for expenses and so on. Again, this is a poison. Now this is an example that might be difficult to digest. However, in other areas, that could apply better. And the last step we said, in the physical diseases, آخر الدواء الكي. It is often said that the last remedy is to burn or amputate. And in this case is to implement punishment on the nafs, a nafs that is not straightening, not changing, not fixing or not mending its behavior, and the diseases are still there despite different methodologies. One may punish it, and that nafs could be punished with what is difficult. Now I want to share a short story. perhaps it's a good lesson. You know, certain things we have in Islamic law or jurisprudence, we have certain things that act in this manner, which we consider a punishment for the self, yeah? Which is typically referred to as kafara, okay? Expiation, I think, is what they translate kafara.
Or the redemption.
Redemption, yeah, redemption or expiation, which is used to for one to purify. Okay, so some aspects of it could be financial, other aspects of it could be even hunger through sawm, fasting, or a combination or giving of, freeing a slave at that time for those who had a slave, and slaves were considered an expensive, giving something that is expensive to acquire. That's why, in fact, putting that kind of a financial burden on a person had two benefits, basically. One is freeing a person, another is putting that financial pressure so that we quit or people quit certain um, uh, sins or certain sinful behaviors. There was a king, apparently, and it's said to be a true story, that had broken his fast in the month of Ramadan intentionally. And a governor or a king in one of the cities in Iran. And so they asked, he had asked the local scholar, what is his basically redemption? What should he do? And the scholar said, you have to fast 60 days, consecutive days. As you know, the ruling, to fast two شهرين متتابعين, as Quran says, two consecutive months. And this is perhaps why 2 months is obviously the 60 days, roughly. However, some of our scholars, they suggest that if you do 31 days, it's okay, because that is connecting the first month with the second month. In any case, so this scholar said you have to do that. Some people said, but we heard that you can feed 60 people. The scholar said, no, he has to fast 60 days. So some people asked, why did you just, give him the only option when the other one is an option? He said, no, because for him, that would not make him feel like any pain. Feeding 60 people for the king, there's no limit. So he can break his entire month's fasting and feed 60 people per day. Whereas the one that has to be, for him to feel the pain, some sort of pain, or feel some level of consequences for his action, I made sure he has to fast the 60 days. So again, sometimes a punishment for the nafs is implemented in order to change. These are the general ones. We then came to the specific, and we said in the specific area, specific remedy for every one of the spiritual diseases that were mentioned earlier. We will cover those. However, there was something important to keep in mind, and we said it is important to realize some remedies are basically a remedy or a cure for multiple spiritual diseases. Sometimes you are using one remedy, but it's actually it's useful for multiple spiritual diseases. The first one, he said, we will cover the area to do with aql, al-quwwa al-aqila, the intellectual faculty, and the diseases related to that. Mentioned one of the diseases being jurbuza. Jurbuza is to try to overanalyze, overusage of the intellectual faculty, and perhaps sometimes in the wrong, with the wrong methodology. So the first remedy for that and for almost every other disease or spiritual disease in this faculty, is recognition of how bad this is. Okay, to recognize its the depth of being wrong when one has that disease. That is important. To realize how ugly something is helps us rid ourselves or have that strong willpower and have more of a stronger intention to rid ourselves from that disease. So oftentimes, if one gets angry and reacts badly, if you were to record them and show them that's what you did, they would be surprised that is me. I don't know if you've ever tried it with children. I would ask a child specialist before I do that, but it has quite a strong effect. They don't want to see that. They don't want to believe that that's them. So realizing how bad or how ugly something is. If one realizes that this kind of wrong usage of one's intellect, which God has given them, how bad that is, that gives them the reason why they should rid themselves from that. And then the next thing is to start using, we said, remember, if we go back to the general remedy or the general methodology for remedies, the second one is or the first, after the realization, the first thing is to start having the right diet, okay, or the right behavior for a spiritual disease. Here is to start using the right methodology of using intellect. What is the right methodology? Obviously, what is taught to us for a believer, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why Rasulullah? Because God says, أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول. So what is taught to us by God and His Messenger, and by extension the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in, where to use and where not to use, or how to use our intellect, to start looking at how they taught us in terms of how to use the intellect. For example, Quran says, لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. When God gives you a verdict or the messenger gives you a verdict, don't have an opinion against it. Okay? Don't try to present something. Okay? Make sure that your opinion is in line with what God and the messenger present. So that is a simple remedy for the jurbuza, and it should be done repetitively in order for for it to become part of our nature. Okay, so anytime we realize that we are thinking without the right methodology, or there is an issue that we have to use our intellect. For example, it is a ruling, Islamic ruling, or it is a conflict that we are trying to help with, or it's something that requires an opinion. Before we jump into conclusions, look at what God and the messenger tell us, and that's how we can avoid jurbuza or misusage of our intellect. The second kind of disease when it comes to the intellectual faculty, or al-aql, is the simple ignorance. And we said the simple ignorance as opposed to the compound ignorance. Difference is simple. One is not aware, does not have the knowledge, but does not think that they know. We said this is not necessarily a disease initially. It is a disease if it stays there. So if we have a question, we have something, we know, there is something that we don't know, and we are aware that we don't know. If we are neglectful of knowing, it becomes a disease. That is jahl. But if we're not neglectful and one tries to seek knowledge, then it's not a disease. The remedy, the first thing is to remember how ugly this is, how bad this is, okay, how bad ignorance is, okay. The simple reminder that what differentiates humans from animals is knowledge. The fact that we know better. And if we don't know, then we are only considered a human being in terms of what we call majaz, figurative human being, the figure of a human being, not a real human being. Because a real human being, al-insan al-haqiqi, a real human being, is one who has knowledge, understanding better than an animal. Otherwise, it would be just the figure of insan. The second thing in this regard, the second remedy or second level, is to remind oneself of all the ahadith, all the texts and ahadith, Islamic texts from Quran and Hadith that speak about the how bad the ignorance is, jahl. Okay, so Quran often condemns those who speak bijahalatin. Okay. In fact, sinfulness is a result of, Quran says, bijahalatin, being ignorant. Okay, not the deliberate one, because that is another extreme of sinfulness, but the one that is through jahala. Okay, which is sinfulness at a lower level. So jahala leads to sinfulness. And so we have in the ahadith, we have multiple ahadith about them condemning the state of jahl. And the last is to remember the virtue of the opposite. So what is the opposite of jahl? Ilm, to have knowledge. So now understanding the virtue of knowledge help us get more incentive, gives us an incentive, okay, and it gives us a stronger willpower to try and rid ourselves from ignorance. This in this area, he has a section on ilm and the honor and fadila, the virtue of ilm, knowledge, and having knowledge. Very important section, elaborate section, and perhaps tonight's session will be focused on that. The importance, and if we were to title tonight's session, it would be the importance and virtue of knowledge, ilm.
When you say, you mean religious knowledge?
Knowledge in general, ilm as opposed to jahl. However, the highest level of knowledge and the correct method of gaining knowledge is to have knowledge of God. So it is religious knowledge essentially. And in fact, in the old days, prior to the modern day developments and specialization, the concept of specialization, our scholars who went to study religion studied almost everything. They were all rounders. They studied medicine, they studied mathematics, they studied astronomy and the stars and so on. So that was, in fact, what they studied at the Islamic seminar. Okay, there was no division like this. You go study religion or go to university. No, it was one. Okay, for instance, the school where Ibn Sina studied, and therefore he became Ibn Sina, or Avicenna as they may refer to in English. Ibn Sina studied as a religious scholar, and he studied philosophy, he studied Islamic ethics, he has basically theories in philosophy and Islamic ethics, and he also studied other fields, including medicine. Now the world knows him for medicine. Why? Perhaps because the world is more focused on the physical aspects of human being, okay, not the spiritual aspect. Although he's a scholar with theories on Islamic philosophy and ethics. Yes, when we speak of knowledge, it's general, but the first area and the prime area of studying from an Islamic perspective is to learn about truth through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is the truth. Allah huwa al-haq. So if we want to learn about truth in everything that exists in the world, we're essentially learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His creation and His attributes and His beauty, all through. So yes, we are referring to the core of it. The purpose, the goal is to seek knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of God, and general. But ilm in general, however, which ilm is most honorable based on even this book that we are studying? In the very beginning, he spoke about the honor and the virtue of seeking knowledge regarding purification, regarding the self and self-purification. Okay, so this is also knowledge. What we're seeking now is knowledge, and the most honorable, because it is how can I be a better human being, a more complete and pure human being. That's the purpose of it. So there are darajat, there are levels in terms of seeking knowledge, and obviously the honor is for those with knowledge. Now, the more knowledge, the more honor. If somebody has some knowledge, or knowledge in certain areas rather than other areas, they are respected, they are knowledgeable. However, the more they have and the more rounded they are in terms of having more understanding of various truth, haqa'iq, alaykum salam, various levels of haqiqa or truth, the better and more complete it is. In this section, he says you should know that ilm, knowledge, is the opposite or the virtue that opposes both types or all types of jahl and jurbuza, the intellectual disease or extremes of not using one's intellect, or overusing one's intellect, or misusing one's intellect. The remedy that would cover all of them is ilm and hikmah, knowledge and wisdom. He says this is the remedy. For this faculty, the remedy is knowledge and wisdom. And so he says, al-jurbuza, al-safsata, al-jahl, all these different jurbuza being overusing, using one's intellect in the wrong way, safsata, or over, more than where we should not use it, we are using it. Okay, we are given, it's not just the religious area. I want to give you an example that is non-religious, not necessarily religious, but shows us how sometimes we should listen more than try and analyze and jump into conclusions. Okay, so the example is from science. Okay, a teacher in science, a teacher in IT or science, trying to teach the students Now, a level 1 student who is just beginning to understand this knowledge, this field of knowledge, does not have the information to have the encompassing understanding of the subject, looking from a very narrow angle, and the teacher is explaining with obviously wider understanding. Okay. Now the student opposing the teacher, having an opinion against the teacher when they have very little understanding, okay, that is what we call jurbuza. Okay, this is thinking when you shouldn't be. Now you should be listening. Okay, listen and understand what is said to you, and then you become at a level of having your own theory. Okay, you haven't even understood the existing theories and you're already jumping into conclusions. So this is what Jurbuza is. The other one is Safsata. If you remember, Safsata, we said, is to basically misuse the faculty of intellect and draw conclusions through wrong analysis. Okay. And it's also considered a part of the disease of the compound ignorance. Basically, basing an opinion on what we call, all the preliminary layers or levels of analysis are wrong, are not correct, and you're basing those analyses to draw a new conclusion, thinking that you have done your homework of analyzing and coming into a conclusion. That is considered safsata, and it's basically compound ignorance. And the other one, the simple one, all of them, the opposite of them is hikmah and ilm. Ilm and hikmah, which is knowledge and wisdom. And he says hikmah is to have the correct knowledge of the truth. The correct knowledge of the truth. For example, hikmah regarding water. Okay, some people look at water on the surface. Okay, water meaning this liquid that we need for survival. We drink it and we give it to our plants or animals. That's as far as they have in terms of understanding or knowledge. Some people know, they go further and look at what is in terms of the elements that are in this water. Okay, some people go further, not just the elements as in the physical elements, okay, and how they exist and how they mix and how chemically it happens. In fact, one of the miracles of God in this on this planet is water, in the bond that it has, the chemical bond that it has, which is the hydrogen bond, the bond between the oxygen and hydrogen, which is unique. This is why water has unique characteristics. When it freezes, it expands. Whenever anything is made colder and freezes, it contracts, whereas water, it expands. And so it has its unique characteristics. So this is one level of understanding water. Another level of understanding water is, again, we spoke about the truth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning the haqq. Understanding the miracle that God has put for us, has created the source of water, meaning all the different things that had to happen for water to exist on the in the form that it exists, therefore life to exist. So recognizing God through water, okay, that's hikmah. Okay, looking at things and seeing God, that's hikmah. Okay. So al-ilm bihaqa'iq al-ashya. So again, the first thing is to recognize the honor of that. And everybody honors those with knowledge. That is one thing we have to remember. It is one of the most uh, beautiful attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that sometimes some, through their ignorance, consider it as separate, almost a separate attribute. Okay, one of the most famous scholars of his time, opposing the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, Anas ibn Malik, he was asked about God. He said, God is in the heavens and his knowledge is everywhere. So you already separated the two. He's got, we've got him, God is separate from his knowledge. This is obviously wrong. But again, it shows us how people recognize this beautiful attribute, divine attribute of knowledge. Okay, ilm. Okay, the one who knows everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of his beautiful attributes is that he is al-alim, the one who knows everything. Okay? That's a beautiful thing. Children, when they're very young, they look up to their parents as gods. And therefore, they know everything. Later on, they realize, okay, they know there are certain things they don't know as they ask them questions. At some point, when they become teenagers, their parents know nothing. Yeah, and then they later on realize that they did know quite a lot. In any case, one of the most beautiful attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-alim. And so ilm makes us more like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make us more like God, the Almighty. And the only way to achieve eternal happiness, this is Jami'u Sa'adat, yes? The collector or collection of felicities, happiness, yeah? And he says the only way to achieve happiness in both worlds is through knowledge. لا يتيسران بدونه. It's not possible without knowledge. It's an amazing thing if you think about it, and the more we analyze, the more we realize how important it is. He says, he quotes from in Al-Hikmah Al-Muta'aliyah, Sadr Al-Muta'allihin Al-Shirazi, one of our greatest scholars, and he was a philosopher and Gnostic, and he had theories in terms of how to gain nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In there he says, إِنَّ الْعِلْمَ وَالتَّجَرُّدْ مُتَلَازِمَانِ. There are two things that are together, knowledge and tajarrud. Tajarrud in Al-Hikmah Al-Muta'aliyah is the highest level of purification. Highest level. And what is tajarrud? A little bit of an explanation. So he says everywhere knowledge increases, tajarrud increases. What is this tajarrud? A little bit of explanation, inshallah, so we understand it. Tajarrud literally means abstraction. Abstract or abstraction. Okay? And what it means in Islamic philosophy is basically a level of immateriality, getting out of material, not thinking التجرد عن المادة, not thinking so materialistic. Get out of that materialistic reality that we're living in, okay? And realize that we have another reality. One of the things that modern science neglects, and some modern scientists deny and consider superstition, is existence beyond material, okay? Immateriality or spirituality, what we consider, okay? Their problem is they only understand and measure things through material things. And even when it comes to certain things that are not easy to explain through the physical world, they try and look at them through the physical results or physical symptoms, not the causes, the symptoms. Meaning what? For example, they say, one of the things that causes depression is lack of vitamin D. Okay? So when there's no sun in certain cities, people are depressed. They say why? It's because of lack of vitamin D. Okay. Did we misunderstand the symptoms with the causes? Have we mixed those? Possibly. As believers, we say yes. Because you could have somebody in the prison cell by himself in the dungeons several feet under the ground, like Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam, saying, Ya Allah, you know how much I love worshiping you. And I wanted to be so free from everything so I can focus on worshiping you. And you have made that available to me. Never depressed, rather extremely excited for having the opportunity to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he's out there free, he has responsibilities. He has family responsibilities, he has community responsibilities, he has society responsibilities, he's the Imam of the Ummah. Therefore, his circle of responsibility is the Ummah, everybody. With all those responsibilities, he would have very little time to actually worship the way he would like to worship. So he's grateful to God that he is in that prison because he is able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They sent him people to lure him, a female to lure him, and other prison guards, some through, they call it the good cop, bad cop. Okay. They tried everything on the Imam, trying to change him. Nothing changed him. They sent him some of the worst people they could imagine, and those people became amongst the lovers of Ahlul Bayt. They said, we couldn't even harm this person. How could we? Okay. So again, they are miscalculating or misinterpreting the situation by suggesting that something that is spiritual is physical, by looking at the physical symptoms. Yes, okay, vitamin D is less, therefore, this is the results of the sun not being there. There's less vitamin D, but that has nothing to do with depression. It's the mindset. Okay, what do I mean by that? Anytime it's cloudy, some people start saying, oh, it's a gloomy day. That mindset already makes you, okay, we can't go out and have fun. Already, one is going to, that is leading to depression. But one who's looking at the clouds thinking, okay, it's going to rain, that is the time of mercy. That's what Islam teaches us, yes? When it's raining, it's a time of rahmah. And it is a time of istijabat al-du'a, answering of dua. One who looks at it that way does not feel down or depressed. So again, tajarrud is important to be as abstract of materialism, as abstract of material things. And another way of looking at it from a spiritual perspective, it is considered ascetic detachment, as zuhud, at-tajarrud for the zahid, for one who is detaching from this world for the sake of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is tajarrud from both perspectives, from the philosophical and the ethical perspective. In there, again, that is a level to try and achieve, that we are not so affected and so imprisoned by our physical being and the physical world that we're in. Okay, Ahlul Bayt, the Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, they put him in one of the worst places in Baghdad, an effort or attempt to humiliate the Imam. One of his companions, he asked him, he said, "You don't know where I am." And he shows the companion, and the companion sees that the Imam is sitting in gardens. So he's looking at himself as the consequences of his patience. What are the consequences of patience? إنما يوفى الصابرين أجورهم بغير حساب. The payback of patience has no hisab, no limit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who pays for it. So tajarrud again is very, very important. And some of our great scholars consider knowledge and this level of detachment or abstraction almost as synonyms, one leading to the other directly. The most important area of knowledge is ma'rifatullah, knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It could start as top down or bottom up. The scholars those who seek the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the start, that is the way of our religious teachings, to start with ma'rifatullah. أول الدين ma'rifatullah, ma'rifatul Khaliq. To know the Creator. I know that I did not create myself, and this universe was not created by itself. Therefore, it has a creator. Let me find out who the creator is. One who starts from there, it is much easier to find the truth. Whereas one who starts from the bottom, okay, they have to search and search and search in order to eventually find out that, oh, it all started from the creator. And guess what? The creator had given me some guidelines how to seek knowledge and how to get answers. And I neglected all of those because I started without ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with the correct approach of seeking knowledge, one could get much further, which is to start with the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, the first and the most important area of knowledge is ma'rifatullah, to learn and know about our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is part of the reason why He created. He says, "Kuntu kanzan makhfiyan," I was a hidden treasure, unknown. I created, so I am known. So knowing Him is the part of the reason of our creation. It is stated to be the reason of our creation, ma'rifatullah. He says, in fact, knowledge and finding answers, even without any consequences of it, any virtue of it, it is a beautiful, delicious thing in itself. In of itself, it is beautiful. Ladhi. In itself, it is beloved in itself. When you find the answers, you feel like you own it. You know, sometimes they say someone, he owns this game or owns this subject. You've heard this term? It is literal ownership, because when we look at the ownership in this world in general of things, is there any ownership in this world that could be considered real, that stays? Or isn't it all figurative, temporary? That's the real ownership. So another layer of ownership, which is actually more lasting, is knowledge of it. If you haven't, some people may disagree with me, but sometimes you could visit a city and know about all its beauties without visiting it. Yes? and know better and more than the people living in that city without even visiting it. That's a reality. So nowadays, adding to it, in the old days, it was only description, descriptive, all words, books you would read. Now, and sometimes, it got to some pictures. Nowadays, we have videos and virtual tours. Yeah. With that, you could actually, from the comfort and convenience of your home, visit many, many cities and do tourism that is very cost effective. The wives are not happy now. But that is a reality. If you learn about things, if you learn about, for example, the way they make things, okay, the way how things are made. Okay? If you learn about how things grow, how trees grow, you enjoy it. Learning is so enjoyable. One of the problems in today's world that many, many people are facing is that we have neglected knowledge and we have paid so much attention to wealth, money. As a result, we are seeking happiness where happiness does not exist. Real happiness is in knowledge. Real happiness. If you find answers, you will find real happiness. In money, people think if I get this number, I'll be happy. If I get this project, I'll be happy. If I get this property, I'll be happy. If I get this car, I'll be happy. And they keep seeking it and they never get it. Never. They get to one level and they want more and more and more, and they're never satisfied. Whereas one who finds answers finds satisfaction, therefore wants more answers. Imam Ali alayhi salam has a beautiful statement. He says there are two hungry people that never reach satisfaction. One who seeks money and one who seeks knowledge. Now, how beautiful is the knowledge part? Seeking it is much easier, yes? And protecting it is even easier. Money, the more you have, the more stress you have. How do I protect it? Okay, in today's world, with the economy going the way it's going, people who are so concerned about money, they're freaking out. Okay, what's going to happen? What do I do with my estates? What do I do with my assets, with my stock? Do I put it in this? Do I put it in that? Virtual, crypto, non-crypto, whatever, gold. Somebody today was telling me gold is now 4,000 something. I don't know what it was for it to be this now. Don't ask me. But this is the reality. Whereas knowledge brings pleasure, brings happiness that is so much more affordable, stress-free, and lasting. So he says, there is so much happiness that could be achieved through seeking knowledge and finding answers and finding the truth of things that cannot be achieved with anything else. It is a type of ownership. نوع تملك. You own it. And you could call it ownership because every other ownership, he says, is not real. Is majazi, figurative, not real. Then he says one of the benefits of knowledge is that everybody in this world, good and bad, respect knowledge. Everybody. They respect knowledge. And they respect people with knowledge. Al-akhyar wal-ashrar. And even those who have kings, they have to ask scholars, people with knowledge, especially when times of difficulty, during the times of COVID, everybody was looking. All of a sudden, a scientist now, some people have their opinions about some of these scientists. Nevertheless, A scientist became more important than every president. Remember that? Because he had knowledge. So again, everybody respects knowledge, and even kings have to submit to those with knowledge. And if we go to the Quran, then the story becomes extremely clear. There are a few ayat in the Holy Quran that if we just look at those ayat, we have all the reason. And we said knowledge is the remedy for intellectual diseases like jurbuza, like safsata, like al-jahl al-basit. All sorts of ignorance and misuse of the intellectual faculty could be remedied and treated through knowledge. This is why we're speaking of the significance of knowledge. One of the ayat in Surah Fatir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, the only ones who fear the Almighty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are those with knowledge. Innama. Amazingly, this ayah, even if one was to read the ayah without knowledge, this is 2 minutes difference. Is that what you said last time? Okay, so inshallah we can conclude. Yeah, so this ayah, as I said, it tells us that if we didn't have knowledge, even this ayah itself could be misunderstood. What do I mean by that? The format of the ayah is not the regular format in the Arabic language. Normally, in the Arabic language, you have the verb, and then you have the subject, and then you have the object. In this sentence, it's the verb, and then the object, and then the subject. Who fears? The scholars, not God. So it's the opposite, and the only way to know the difference is through the accent, the fatha. Allah, not Allahu. Yes? If one did not know, they did not have knowledge, they would not know how to read the ayah, and they would misunderstand this ayah in itself.
Which ayah is this?
Surah Fatir, I believe it's ayah 28. 28 or, yeah, I think. So yes, inshallah, we will continue in the coming session. And I apologize that we didn't have the chance for questions, as now it is.
Time is short. We can start.
Yes. Start earlier. I don't know if people can make it.
6, quarter to 6,
Or have the Q&A after Salat, maybe from next session. So have a shorter session and Q&A after Salat.
6 makes sense because after
Quarter
Salah
to?
people will,
It's gone. Okay, inshallah, we can do that, inshallah. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد آل محمد.